Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another video, and today I'm going to be doing my best to try and teach you how to play Lightsworn Tearlaments, which as a deck isn't the most competitive, I'm not going to lie to you, but of all the Lightsworn and Tearlament variants that I tend to feature on this channel, this is definitely the most fun of all the variants that I have. So if you want to familiarize yourself with the deck list before we actually get into the video itself, it's going to be the most recent Lightsworn Tearlaments list that I posted, which should go up basically the day before this one. So yeah, just check that one out first, and then once you're done there, feel free to come back on over here, and then I guess I'm going to do my best to try and teach you. So with that out of the way, let's jump straight into it. Now, as is always the case with these types of videos, we're going to give the deck a nice proper shuffle just to ensure that our hands are as realistic as possible, because I want to help you guys basically see what a real, true, authentic hand for this deck looks like, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and then how to try and best play through it. So we're just going to give it a quick pause, shuffle over here, and I guess when it comes to the video itself, if you guys see any mistakes or maybe any potential better lines, feel free to point them out down below. I definitely would encourage it, because it means that it's another opportunity for us, both me and you, to grow as players and just continue to evolve the deck in places that even, that I normally wouldn't notice. So yeah, like I said, don't be shy. Feel free to share whatever suggestions you may have. And just be nice about it, please. I'm very fragile. But okay, so we'll just give it one last cut. And now we can see what our opening hand is, being Primeval Planet Pearl Rhino, already off to a good start. Fiendsmith Sanct, so we are going to be including the Fiendsmith engine for this one. Lightsworn Dragonling, Fiendsmith Tract, and Sulyak. Okay, so this hand is actually kind of just bonkers for the most part, just because it does so many different things. And as for what we're going to be starting with, I think it's pretty much like a no-brainer in this situation that we're going to be starting with Sanct first, just because it's the one that gets rid of the most potential hand traps. And while I guess it technically does play around Droll, which we don't really want to like mess around with just yet. So we're gonna go with Fiendsmith Sanct first, and we're just gonna special summon it because it's literally just drones. So if you control no cards, it summons itself as like a token, and then you can just link this off into our Fiendsmith Requiem, and then using our Fiendsmith Requiem, we're gonna use its effect to tribute itself, special summon an Engraver, because this is literally all we play. That's why I said you should familiarize yourself with the list first, just because there are some, I guess, more unconventional choices compared to how I normally would play it. And one of the main ones is that Fiendsmith Engraver is the only card that we're playing, and we're playing it at 2. So no Lacrima, no Larry, none of that stuff. But it's still perfectly fine in just getting the job done, right? And then we're going to activate our Requiem right here, put it on the Engraver, and then we're going to link that one off into our Necroquip Princess. And from here, we're just going to go with our Engraver, special summon itself back by putting the Requiem back. And you have two choices, right? So I always say that it's dependent on if your hand is actually good or not. And our hand is actually just really solid, so we don't need to go for the Pilgrim Reaper to bank on milling 5. And as a result, that means that we can go for the High King Caesar, just so that we can have some little extra bit of protection against cards like Nibiru, which, I mean, if they had it, they probably would have dropped it by now, if I'm being honest. But it's fine, Even so, like this is still just like an enormous obstacle that the opponent has to overcome, and it's incredibly difficult for a lot of decks to do it, unless of course it's Ryzeal and then just activate exit, which actually doesn't activate, it just summons itself because Ryzeals are broken for whatever reason. All right, so we have our protection in the form of Wave High King Caesar, and even if our opponent did have Nib, they'd probably just do it here, even though we haven't like committed anything, right? Unless they have Imperm, but it's fine. So right off the bat, just off of one card, because the Fiendsmith engine is insane, we have basically double Solemn Warning. So next up, we have a choice between activating Fiendsmith Tract and activating Primeval Planet Pearl Rhino. I think we're just going to go with the Pearl Rhino first, just because it allows us to, one, if we do end up getting hit by Droll, we can actually make plays, especially compared to like the Fiendsmith Tract, right? Where we're more than likely going to be adding Weiss and then discarding the Sulyak. But then that play specifically just makes us lose the Droll and Lockbird, so I want to avoid that at all costs. But this play, on the other hand, at least gives us some options to be able to try and do something that we normally wouldn't be able to. So yeah, we're going to go for Primeval Planet Pearl Rhino next. And we're just going to put this right here in the middle over our token, or our field center. And with that, we now have a choice, right? So we can add a Tear Cache, we can add a Sharon, we can add a Rhino Heart. but we're just always going to be playing under the assumption that our opponent doesn't have the out. So as a result, the best course of action here would be to add the Tearlaments Kashtira, just because we're going to be able to get our Celiac into the graveyard using our Fiendsmith Tract very, very shortly, so we're going to have free fodder for this card pretty much no matter what. But even if we were playing a round roll, I think this one is oddly enough, it's either this or Rhinoheart. We probably wouldn't be adding the Sharon, but this one is probably still just like the safer option in most situations. So now we can activate our Fiendsmith Tract, and this is one of the reasons why I was telling you why you should be playing both, just because, yeah, if you're like on a budget, obviously you don't want to play Tract. It is an expensive card, but just the value that this card generates alone is pretty much just like unmatched, right? Because just off of this card right now, we're going to be able to add our Weiss to our hand, which is very important for accessing our Lightsworn portion of the combos. And we're going to be able to get rid of the traps or spells that we don't really want, such as our Celiac into the graveyard. And then off of that, we're going to be able to trigger our Celiac to be able to add any tier monster. And with this one, I think I want to add Tearlaments Sharon instead. So normally I would be adding Rhinoheart, but because I don't really want to use my normal summon on Weiss, since we've already gone through the full Fiendsmith combo, and we still want to get this card into the graveyard at some point just to be able to take advantage of Dragon Link, that means that we're probably going to have to discard it off the Sharon just to special summon it in mill 3. But, you know, just little plays like that that you need to consider constantly when playing a deck like this. So now, what's the next best course of action? You may be thinking, might as well just go for Sharon to get rid of the Weiss right now, right? But I don't know about that. I think it's actually better to go for the Tearlaments Kashtira first, just because you always want to consider your Tearlaments Grief in the deck, right? And you're going to be milling it at some point, and you want to make your cards as live as often as possible. So the best way to do that is to special summon our Tearlaments Kashtira, banish the Celiac pretty much right from the get-go, and now, after all of our milling that we're going to be doing, if we hit a Grief, that means we're going to be able to add this back every single time, which normally wouldn't be a possibility if you start with like the Sharon or the Lightsworn stuff before you start with the Tier Cache. So just another thing to consider when playing this deck. And now that we summoned our Tier Cache, we get to mill 3 more cards, being the Merly, the Meta Noise, and the Scream. Fantastic cards. We're not going to be using the Merly because we don't want to fuse away our Sharon just yet. But as for Meta Noise and Tearlaments Scream, those are pretty solid stuff. Now, as for how you should be chain blocking, so provided this is like, we just started off with this, right? And we didn't even use like our Tier Cache. You should always try and keep your searches as the ones that resolve last in your chain. So that means you're going to be activating them first, just so you can play around cards like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, right? And then it's really important for when you're trying to trigger like a card like Celiac, for example, where it's one of the more impactful cards in the entire deck, right? Because it adds you any Tearlament monsters. So being able to ensure that those cards resolve it basically just impacts the game in so many different ways, right? So if you can chain block, you should, but I know that's not always going to be a possibility. And as for why we're not using Merly, like I said, we just want to conserve the Sharon and use its hand effect in order to get rid of cards like Weiss before we do anything like that. So yeah, Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2, add back the Merly, and then our Scream will add the final Celiac of our deck. Or depending on if it's like game 2 or 3, maybe you have like a Tearlaments Crime or something that you've also cited in, but yeah, we're basically just always going to try and get the Celiac just because the negate is so important, especially because we already milled the Meta Noise. So from here, our next best course of action, while we can go through the Sharon line, I don't know if it's quite worth it doing that over the Merly just quite yet, but I think we're just going to conserve the Merly and go straight for the Sharon, honestly, just so that we can start doing our Lightsworn combos before our field gets too clogged. So as a result, we're going to special summon the Sharon, and we're going to discard the Weiss, and then mill 3, Primeval Planet Pearl Rhino, Wolf, Lightsworn Beast, and Call by the Grave. So the Wolf is going to activate because it's mandatory, but truth be told, we kind of didn't really want to hit anything when it came to the Lightsworn monsters, just because this is one of the issues that's very prevalent in this deck, where you just tend to clog your zones very quickly. So I guess what we have to do now is we're going to have to overlay these two pretty early, even though I didn't really want to. And as a result, we're just going to put it up here so that we can free up a little bit of space. Although that's probably going to come back to bite us, because at some point we are going to have to link the zone off. So maybe we don't put it up there. But we're still going to be making the Time Thief Redoer, just because this one allows us to quite literally just free up a zone whenever we want, right? As well as just continuously take our opponent's resources. But yeah, so we did that. Now we have the Weiss in the graveyard, so now we can freely go into our Lightsworn Dragonling, which we of course are going to. So we're going to special summon the Dragonling using its effect, and then because it was special summoned, it's going to Foolish our Felice. So this will in turn now activate all of our Synchro plays, and from there, we can now Synchro these two, and this time we're actually going to be putting this one in the extra monster zone just because we need exactly 2 free spaces in the main monster zone in order to actually play. So we're going to special summon the Minerva. Minerva is going to send 2 Lightsworns of different types. So we're going to be sending another Felice, and we're going to be sending the Weiss as well. Felice's effect will trigger to summon itself, and then Weiss's effect will trigger to bring back the Dragonling. It can bring back the Felice. It genuinely doesn't really matter in this situation, and I'll explain why in a bit. But just to be safe, it's better to be safe than sorry in this situation, especially because not everyone's list is the same, right? Especially if you end up playing a bunch of level 8 Synchro monsters besides the 2 that I'm currently using, and I'll get over why. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to Synchro these 2 into our Visas and Ratara, and then Visas effect will activate to search out any card that mentions Visas Starfrost in its text, so we're going to get the Scream to our hand. Now, I mentioned earlier that we could have brought back the double Felice, and here's why. So Visas Amritara is a pretty interesting card, and it's because of its summoning conditions. It says 1 tuner plus 1 light monster. So unlike most synchros, it doesn't say 1 tuner plus 1 non-tuner light monster or whatever. So as a result, you can actually use multiple tuners to summon this card, right? So say for example, you have like a Weiss and a Felice in your hand. You special summon the Weiss, sending the Felice, and then you can synchro both of them into this. It's very similar to the XX Saber Gothams in the sense where it's just one of those few cards that just doesn't have that restriction for whatever, especially compared to the Minerva, right? So it says 1 tuner plus 1 non-tuner monster. This card doesn't say that. So, you know, this card a little silly, especially because it's one of those cards that just allows us to do double tuners for whatever reason. As long as the other monster is a light, it doesn't matter. And there's another thing that you can consider, right? So Weiss Felice is not a brick. You know, that's basically still full combo into your like Tearlament portion. So yeah, you know, just things to consider. So now we're just going to activate the Scream because we were probably going to summon at some point, right? But now we can activate our Minerva Synchro's effect. We're going to banish our 4 Lightsworn monsters, and it doesn't matter which 4 because we're not playing Punishment. So just any 4 that we happen to have. So we're going to hit up Medora, great. Rhinoheart, fantastic. Another Engraver, that's whatever. And an Ash Blossom, which, you know, we want these in our hand. But now by hitting the Medora, we have a Shuffler, and we're not going to be using the Rhinoheart effect. This is basically just in here so that we can finally start going for the Kaleidoheart plays, which, I mean, if we really wanted to, we could, because we're just going to have to basically go for our Redoer effect first. But we're not going to be doing that. Next up, we're going to be overlaying our Visas Amritara and our Minerva into the Zombie Vampire, and the Zombie Vampire will now in turn detach, and what we detach genuinely doesn't matter. At least in this situation, there are certain times where you have like a level 8 Dark Monster, and that's pretty much always going to be like the better detach, just because it means that you're going to be able to fuse with it more frequently. But because they're both light monsters, like I said, it just does not matter. So we're going to be milling a Planet, a Foolish Burial Goods, a Havness, and a Weiss. I don't think it's worth going for the Havness just yet. Let me just consider all our options. Because basically, we can either go for the Garura line by fusing back the Merly, or we can go for a Kaleidoheart line because we milled the Rhinoheart, right? And I think... no, I don't think it matters too much, just because like we've already milled everything that we need to, right? We have this. The only card left that we could potentially mill to actually do anything is our Tearlament's Grief. So by this point, we don't even really need to mill any more cards. We're just milling for the sake of milling, which I mean isn't a bad thing because that means that we're going to be able to consistently fusion summon during our opponent's turn more often. But it's just one of those things that I think it's fine, yeah. So we're going to go for Havness, but we're not going to make the Kaleidoheart just yet. I think we're going to be like a little bit on the greedier side and go for the Tearlament's Merly. Or I mean the Garura instead of the Kaleidoheart. Sorry, this is just one of those many things that you always have to consider. But, nah, forget it, it's fine. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're just going to be fusing all three of these back. We don't care about the draw. We already have everything in our hand. It would be nice to add like another Tearlaments Kashtira to our hand, but it's not really all that needed, right? So we're just going to special summon the Kaleido Heart, and then because we can activate our planet to blow up the Kaleido Heart, and then Kaleido Heart's effect will make it come back. And we're just going to send the Grief to be able to add back another Solyak to our hand. So we'll trigger that, add this back to our hand. Now, as for the zone placement, it should not be under the extra monster zone. I just ran out of space, but it's pretty much always going to be like in the other zone just because you don't want to lose to like a random relinquished anima, right? So now we have double Solyak in our hand, which means that if we mill a Rhino Heart at some point, not during our turn, but during our opponent's turn, we're basically going to be set. Now you'd be wondering, do I want to activate the Scream? No, we've already used all the tier monsters that we care about. So we basically just milled everything. So milling 3 off of the Scream is kind of just like pointless in this situation. We'd much rather just conserve it for, well, I mean, it's not like we have to like save it to be able to use it on the opponent's turn. It's just that we don't really want to be caught in a position where we're milling cards like a Tearlaments Happiness again instead of keeping it live. But I guess I can do it anyways, right? Like, you basically just might as well go all in with a deck like this. So let me just, so we have both of them in screen. So yeah, we're just going to activate Screen because we can. So we're going to mill Tear Cash, which we didn't want, Rhino Heart, which is whatever, and another Rhino Heart. And that's exactly why you don't activate Tearlaments Scream. Because we very much would have preferred these cards stay in the deck so that we can use them or try and summon them during like our opponent's turn or whatever. So we're just going to pretend that we didn't do that. But instead, we're going to be now linking these two off into our SP Little Knight. And from here, we're just going to be activating our SP Little Knight's card effect on summon to banish a card in the graveyard. And it's going to be from our opponent's graveyard because we milled 4 of their cards off the Zombie Vampire. So hopefully we hit something important like a Mitsurugi Ritual or something that we can just get rid of entirely for the rest of the game for the most part. And like that. Our board is honestly pretty stacked. We're only going to be setting one of our Tearlaments Solyak just because we want to keep one in hand for the chance that we end up milling a Tearlaments Rhino Heart, pretending that we didn't see what's on top of our deck, right? But just like that, the board state's pretty strong, you know? You got a Time Thief Redoer, which is going to take an opponent's card. Hopefully it's a spell so we can draw. And then you're also just going to be able to detach the Sharon to be able to fusion summon again during your turn. And we have 2 Solemn Warnings with our High King Caesar. We have an SP Little Knight interaction. We're going to be able to mill 3 with our Tearlaments Scream. So if we hit like another Aqua monster at some point, Kaleido Heart can shuffle a card. Or if we negate an opponent's monster with our Solyak and send the Kaleido Heart, it'll be able to come back, Foolish a Tier monster, and then also shuffle back a card. We have a Shuffler in the graveyard in the form of Mudora still that we can use for like another layer of interactions. And then, provided we're able to mill a Rhino Heart, we now have the fodder necessary to discard, so we're just going to discard the Solyak, special summon the Rhino Heart, and then off of that as well, we're going to be able to add another Tearlaments Kashtira to our hand. So, you know, the board is very layered, it has a lot of interactions, very unique points to try and play around and play with the opponent. So, yeah, with that, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned a thing or two. Feel free to point out any mistakes that you see down below, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, you know, that's pretty important. So with that, I'll catch you guys next time. Take it easy. See ya.